So this is the week. We're going to start hearing more about this infrastructure bill. We have the American Jobs Plan. We have the American Families Plan. So we're going to hear these politicians start to talk about what they want to do and how they want to negotiate this bill. And if they want to do a small infrastructure bill, or if they want to do a larger infrastructure bill, make two large bills, or they want to break it down into some small bite-sized bills. So I want to listen to Senator Portman, and he's going to be talking a little bit about what he sees in an infrastructure bill and how he wants to move forward. But first off, you guys can do me a favor. Please hit the like button. It does help with the YouTube algorithm. Also, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that little bell notification. That way you'll get notified anytime we put out a video. Okay, so let's go ahead and listen to Senator Portman here. We'll talk about it as we watch.
Joining me now is Republican Senator Rob Portman of Ohio. Senator Portman, welcome back to Meet the Press. Earlier this week,
Chuck. Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah, good to see you. Earlier this week, you seemed to lament and be a little bit, I would say, skeptical of the outreach that you're now receiving from the White House. You said you were hopeful, and then after in COVID relief, you felt as if it wasn't sincere. Senator Capito says that she feels as if her exchanges so far with the White House are much different this time than they were over COVID relief. Would you concur with that?
Yes, I think it's going to be a better opportunity. And frankly, if the White House is willing to work with us, this is a deal we can do. Infrastructure has always been bipartisan. It's a different sort of a proposition than some of the spending that Janet Yellen just talked about. Secretary Yellen talked about the $6 trillion in new spending. Only about 20% of the jobs bill that the president has proposed goes to real infrastructure. And that part of it can be paid for. It can be paid for with user fees. It can be paid for with some of the COVID money that's already gone out because states would love to use it for infrastructure. And of course, it can be paid for in different ways as we have in the past, like PPPs, public-private partnerships, but also an infrastructure bank, because these are long-term capital expenditures. So it's very possible, Chuck, that we can get a deal here if they're willing to do it. You know, we'll see. With COVID, you're right. A bunch of us went to the White House, made a proposal, and the president indicated he wanted to negotiate. But unfortunately, the next morning, they changed their mind, and Chuck Schumer announced we were all going to do this by reconciliation, which knocks Republicans out of the game altogether. So let's hope we don't have a repeat of that, because I think we can come up with a good bill that's bipartisan and one that actually will survive over time, because it'll be more sustainable with Republican and Democrat support.
Look, you just made a very similar case about how, hey, this is capital expenditures. Most companies, when they make capital expenditures, they borrow money. So is there a case to be made that maybe on the physical infrastructure, that deficit spending is actually the way to go, especially since the pay for here is going to be arguably the largest sticking point between the two sides?
I think the way to go is to depend on user fees, as we always have, and about $200 billion will come in over.
Now, he keeps talking about user fees. Now, user fees are taxes on us. That's basically what he's saying. So gas tax, he was talking about the mileage tax for electric vehicles. So instead of raising the corporate tax rate, we're just going to tax everybody. It's basically what he's saying.
Over the next 5 years, through the Highway Trust Fund alone, but also through the government being able to borrow at lower rates. And Secretary Yellen didn't talk about this, but the infrastructure bank and the P3 I talked about earlier, that's essentially using the government's ability to borrow at lower rates and over time to be able to pay for these projects. So it's not deficit spending, but it is, because it's a capital expenditure, paid for in a different way. And that's one reason we can get to this. On the COVID side, these states are getting lots of money. They don't know what to do with it in many cases. Some are talking about sending it back. Some have already done that. Others would like to use it for infrastructure. That's a great opportunity. Normally the ratio is 20% local, 80% federal. There are plenty of states, including my own, that would love to use it for roads and bridges and other infrastructure and be willing to pay a higher percentage, maybe 50-50, some even 100%. That delta, the difference between the 20% and 50 or 100, certainly would be used to pay for infrastructure. So there's lots of opportunities here, Chuck, for us to get to yes. I would like to comment on what Secretary Yellen said about the tax increases, too, if that's okay.
Well, I will. I want to ask you, though, about the issue of user fees, because you have proposed them. And you're not the only Republican that has. But do you realize that the head of the Republican Senate campaign committee has basically vowed to run to take a gas tax, if that's what is raised, and essentially try to use it as a political weapon? So do you understand if Democrats may be skeptical of this offer?
Now, and this is important. So basically what the interviewer was saying is that Republicans might want to use this as a weapon in the future. So go ahead and say, yeah, you know, we're for this what would be a gas tax in order to pay for the infrastructure bill. And then once this infrastructure bill gets signed and then people start realizing that the gas prices are going sky high, well, then the Republicans are going to step back and say, well, you know, this is something that the Democrats wanted, and so that's why we move forward with it. But so it's kind of one of those things where, do you want to raise taxes on everyone, or do you want to raise the corporate tax on the rich? That's the talk right now.
Well, you're talking about increasing the gas tax. I was referring to the $200 billion that comes in the door from the existing gas tax.
But user fees, you've talked about user fees. A gas tax is a user fee.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, another user fee that makes a lot of sense is, as we're moving to more and more electric cars and hybrids, and I'm a hybrid driver myself, my hybrid truck should pay something to use, you know, roads and bridges. So we should put something there, the vehicle miles traveled idea on electric cars, or some sort of a fee. Makes a lot of sense to make sure there's a level playing field and there's fairness there. Mm-hmm. So there are ways to get there. My point, Chuck, is that Democrats and Republicans alike are meeting. We've got some phone calls scheduled this week. I met with the White House late last week. There's a way forward here, if the White House is willing to work with us.
I want to ask about the other parts that President Biden is proposing. And for instance, on the issue of education, he makes an argument that, hey, for years, we've funded essentially K through 12, and that it's a time that the government essentially add 4 years of education that it guarantees. 2 on the front end, 2 on the back end. Before we get to whether to pay for that, should the government be guaranteeing 4 more years of education in the 21st century?
Well, typically it's not a federal government responsibility. As you know, feds probably pay about 6 or 7% of K through 12 education. So I think we can provide some incentives for it. I think pre-K makes sense. It's good to give kids a better start in life. There's no question about it. That's, you know, one reason we do support Head Start at the federal level. And then with regard to community colleges, I'm a big fan of what community colleges do. What's much more exciting to me in the proposal is the possibility that we would actually be able to use some of the federal support, including Pell Grants, for worker retraining, because that's what's really needed is skills training. And the opportunity for us to allow people to get a relatively short-term training session to get an industry-recognized certificate in things like welding or machining or coding on the IT sector or hospital techs. Those are the jobs we really need right now, these middle skills jobs. And so I would make more of an emphasis on that, because that's actually the reality out there, is that we have a lot of jobs going unfilled. There's something like 500,000 jobs in manufacturing right now being offered and not filled. And one of the reasons is the skills gap. So let's close the skills gap. To me, that would be the most effective way to use that funding.
Now, that's good. The Pell Grant, I think if you can allow people to get these technical jobs, like get the technical training that they need for these jobs through Pell Grant, so you don't have to pay anything. It's actually a free education for a lot of people. I think that would be good. The community college, free community college, they've been talking about this. President Biden's been talking about it. Senator Bernie Sanders has also been talking about it. So we'll have to follow it and see where this goes when it comes to the American Families Plan. But that's what they have for this human infrastructure, part of the human infrastructure.
Before I let you go, one of the things you said in deciding not to run for re-election is you lamented the fact that bipartisanship isn't rewarded. And in fact, you are somebody that has already voted with President Biden quite a bit. You yourself have noted that you don't seem to get credit, that you've been one of the more bipartisan Republicans when it comes to working with Democrats. So why not stay and fight and make that point? You know, I know the political climate does punish that. You're right. Punishes it on the left, punishing it on the right. Why not stay and fight to change that attitude?
Well, I'm in for another 2 years, and there's lots of fights to be had, including I'd love to talk about the higher taxes that Janet Yellen talked about, because they will not make our economy more competitive. It does just the opposite. I respect her, but she's just wrong on that. In fact, by raising the corporate taxes the way she wants to, you're going to hurt workers. The Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, says that 70% of the tax cuts went into workers' pockets with higher wages and benefits, and the exact same thing is going to happen if you raise these taxes. And by the way, they're talking about raising the taxes 5 times higher than the taxes were cut in 2017. So this makes America not competitive again around the world, and everybody thought that was important at the time. But look, my decision was in large measure a personal one. I've been doing this for 30 years off and on, working for 4 administrations, and and working in the Congress, both in the House and the Senate. And, you know, it's time to give someone else a chance. But I'm going to stay involved. But for the next couple of years, I'll be very engaged in trying to make sure that on a bipartisan basis we get some things done for the American people and not continue the partisan fights, but instead actually figure out how to find that common ground. And I think we can. And infrastructure is a great example of it. It's always been bipartisan in the past. Republicans have proposed the biggest infrastructure plan in the history of Congress just last week. So we're ready to go. We want to roll up our sleeves and get to work and help make America's economy more competitive, not by raising taxes, but by doing smart things in terms of expanding our infrastructure.
Senator Rob Portman.
All right, so there was Senator Portman. So the question is, how are we going to pay for it? And this is, you're going to hear this going back and forth, back and forth. Right now, the Democrats do want to raise the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%. Senator Manchin, he's a Democrat, he said that, you know, 28%, that's too high. 25% is probably fair. At this point, that's what he's saying. So that probably means the Democrats are going to have to move that down to about 25%. But the Republicans at this point, they don't want to raise the corporate tax rate at all. They're looking more at the gas tax or these mileage fees that they want to tack on. So we're going to have to follow it and see where it goes. But like I said, when it comes to the gas tax or when it comes to a mileage tax, that's going to be on most Americans. So the gas tax will affect a large group of people, and then you have people who drive electric vehicles. That mileage tax is going to affect them. And another thing I want to mention too, it's not just the gas tax. You have to think of what that means, because businesses are going to be paying for this gas tax as well. And so delivery services are going to go up. If you order an item on Amazon, it's probably going to go up in price because that gas tax is going to affect everyone. And so we're going to have to see what they do with this. But I personally don't like to hear this gas tax thing be just thrown around like it's nothing, and the mileage tax, because if they do that, it's going to make everything more expensive. So not only am I going to be paying more out of pocket for just getting gas, but I'm going to also be paying more out of pocket to get items. So I want to know what you guys think about this. So in the comment section, let me know down below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye.